So today was day one. Me and my mother are completely exhausted. A couple fun facts that I felt about Italy. It's super old, which I kind of expected, but even in some aspects, I'm shocked. Like, we're out more in the suburbs of Rome and how old it is. Also, how small everything is. Like, the roads are super small. The cars are super small. The hotel rooms are super small. It's very interesting because it's close to, like, Japan. Um, the second thing I want to say, one thing that annoys me is the plastic bottle caps. They don't come off. They're stuck on the thing. It's kind of annoying. Um, One amazing thing I think, though, is just the history. We were going past walls and monuments and statues. It's just gorgeous, the Roman Empire being here. So when we got to the hotel, me and my mom were walking down the stairs, and who do you think's there? Taylor Marshall. And I go, Dr. Marshall. And he turns around and treats me like as if I'm family, like he's known me for 50 years. Hey, who are you? Oh, it's nice to meet you. Oh, yeah, here's your mom. And just overall, a really sweet guy. We were praying in a church, and I just turned to him and I was like, Dr. Marshall, is that so-and-so? He's like, no, I don't think so. Come on over here. Let's read the thing. Amazing guy so far. Sweet, kind, and real. Everything you see about him on YouTube is exactly who he is. The fun thing we did today was we got to see Saint Sebastian by luck. So when I saw Taylor Marshall when I walked down, he goes, hey, I booked a last minute mass at 4:15. You guys are more than welcome. We're like, yeah. And it was above the catacombs. So when we go in there, guess who I see? I look at this monument, and it's a monument with the 3 arrows. I go, oh my God, that's Saint Sebastian. And yes, in this church that's above the catacombs, and I'm going to show you videos and photos, is Saint Sebastian's body under it and his relics up on top. And also above the church on the ceiling was relics as well. And I just was blown away by that. And then I got to experience my first Latin Mass. This was a low Latin Mass, which means that it's not the full Latin Mass, meaning like there's no Gregorian chants. It was really interesting. I felt like I went back 2,000 years. I have like St. Augustine next to me on my left and St. Thomas Aquinas on my right. The silence in it. And I think two things that really affected me, no offense to the Novus Order, but when you see a priest turn his back and he takes 2 to 5 minutes lifting that Eucharist up at the altar. Same thing with the wine. And then everyone getting on their knees and him blessing and then putting it on your tongue and being like, whoa. Look at how special the Eucharist is. I'm going to be, because today was my first time, tomorrow I'm going to be one of the families we ate with. They're going to be teaching me how to use my daily missal and actually how to follow along with the Latin Mass, because I was pretty overwhelmed. Just, again, I don't understand the language and the way it's moving, but it was really beautiful. And it was very surreal and very different from the Novus Order. What I would challenge is how much they make the Eucharist so sacred, and how I feel the Novus Order is just like throwing the bread around and then putting it in someone's mouth. And probably I'm going to get yelled at for saying that. Because yes, I still believe in the Novus Order, which I've gone to my entire life, is still the flesh and blood of Christ, and I believe it does become that. But there was something about this, the specialness to it, the uniqueness. Day 2, we got to see Pope Leo XIV. He had a papal audience. So it was really cool to see the Pope. It was mostly in Italian. There were other languages. English was used. Pope Leo XIV maybe spoke 5 minutes of English. it was cool to see the Pope. I was okay about the thing because, again, I couldn't even understand anything. And, like, maybe this is controversial, but if you Google right now, what is the standard language around the world for business, right? Or standardized language. There's one language. It's English. So, and especially being an American Pope, I know we're in Italy. I know we're in Rome. But I think there should be at least, like, English subtitles under when he's speaking, or, I don't know. That's just my opinion. Then we went to 2 basilicas. But before that, I got some lunch. We were walking around. There's tons of fun shops that priests and certain congregations pay for, like where the wine is, the staffs that bishops use, tabernacles, like really cool shops around Vatican City. So that was cool. And then me and Taylor Marshall, the groups are walking around. Me and him were walking around and talking about theology in the Vatican City. And that was really cool to just sit there and go back and forth on theology, or what are your thoughts about this, or what do you think about that? Then there was a pickpocketer at one moment, which was very entertaining. The tour guides picked up on what the lady was doing, and they were all yelling, and that was kind of a fun drama to deal with, But other than that, Rome is pretty safe. It's not, I haven't felt that I'm in a bad area at all or anything like that. And then we went to 2 basilicas. What was the basilica?
Holy Cross.
The Holy Cross, in which Saint Helena, that's Constantine's mother. Now, Constantine, made religious freedom in Rome, and he let Catholics be Catholics, and were allowed to express their religion. And then Constantine's mother, Saint Helena, because she was such a big fan of Catholicism, she went to Jerusalem and brought back relics. So they had a lot of relics in that church. And then we went to the original Vatican church, the Basilica. What was that called?
St. John.
St. John's. Sorry, I just don't want to say the wrong names. And that church, that basilica, was probably, I know I haven't been to St. Peter's. Tomorrow's St. Peter's. That was probably one of the most beautiful churches I've ever been to. And I'll show you footage of it. The disciples going across, the monuments of the disciples, the paintings going on with the, that they have. And then the lady was saying on the tour, which I thought was interesting, most people couldn't speak English. So what was interesting, sorry, I said that wrong. Most people couldn't read. So what was interesting is that they were learning Christianity, Catholicism, through the paintings. And I thought that was really, really neat. That, yeah, you're right. Like, it was using art to illustrate Christianity. And it was really, really beautiful church. The monuments, the paintings, and it was like multiple different generations of art being put in it. So you've got like some Baroque, you've got some of this, you've some of that. So it's also, the Basilica was an interesting, the art was so interesting in it because it was kind of different but put all together. Pope Leo XIII is buried there. And if we all know Pope Leo XIII, that's the Pope that made the St. Michael prayer. That was really cool. And then we finished the day with Latin Mass. And it was again where St. Sebastian is buried, and it's above the catacombs, so there's hundreds of thousands of dead people under us, which is so beautiful to be able to pray and be in that, tomb basically. And it was hard. This is my second day of Latin Mass, and it was hard. Today was hard. There's a lot of moments in the Latin Mass where you're just on your knees and you're still and there's silence. And I think being in the Novus Order, or if you don't know what that means, being in the Catholic Church of this generation, it's singing and then sitting and then reading and then singing and then we're going to read again. Now we're doing a homily and now we're shaking each other's hands. Peace be with you. It's interesting, like, how not patient I am. And kind of really being one with Christ and not having your brain run around and not having to have something keep your attention, that you have to keep your attention now. That was a really interesting experience today. So today is day 3. We woke up super early. I got some breakfast. The Italian pastries and donuts are absolutely delicious. We do the Vatican Museum first. And I'll share some photos with you right now as we're speaking. And it was interesting. They were talking about when the popes were living there, where did they stay, where did they live, the works of art. There was another big monument of Pope Leo the 13th, which was interesting, during one of the hallways. And the museum was awesome. It had a bunch of Greek and Roman and Egyptian artifacts because obviously the Roman Empire, took over Egypt and took a lot of their artwork and their monuments and brought it back to Rome. And then we went to the famous picture of Michelangelo, which is above the Sistine Chapel. It was gorgeous. You can't take pictures, so unfortunately I can't show you pictures, but you've seen pictures online. I know I recognize a lot of the Jesus photos where they kind of go through his life. I think my favorite photo, which Michelangelo didn't do the sidewalls, he did the top, which is the famous finger pointing of God and man. It was absolutely gorgeous. It was seeing where the conclave was, seeing how it's actually fortified, that room, like a military base. Because again, you're talking about the Pope was the king. So if he got attacked, they needed something up on a hill that was not only surrounded by walls, but it was built like a military base. But I think one of my favorite pictures was on the side wall, if you walk in on the left, of Jesus passing the keys to Peter. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then seeing Moses with the 10 Commandments going down, and then the artwork. And again, I said this I might be showing it in this video. I was filming outside the Vatican, and really the question is, why do we not create art like that? Why are we not creating this great, excellent, amazing pieces of art, pieces of buildings that can last for ages? I just don't understand why we don't do that. And then we went under St. Peter's, which was the original church, which is where the pilgrims marched. And there's tombs of all these popes. And I'm in like a Lord of the Rings movie. The other way it recognized, which I never finished the show, and it's a very, very dirty show, Game of Thrones. It reminded me of the first season, whatever that king is, and he's in the tomb praying, and there's just these tombs. That's what it was like with these popes. And then we went up to St. Peter's Basilica. And I know I said on day 2, my favorite was St. John's Basilica, where it was the original headquarters of the Pope. But this church was excellent, massive, beautiful. It's like, as somebody who's from Jersey, St. Patrick's Cathedral, it's like 10 of them put together. And then being able to see where Peter's buried. And then being able to go where Peter was crucified. Because originally this was Nero's circus. Nero was the emperor, and he had the circus, and he had him crucified in the circus, which he was crucified upside down, fun fact. And the bones that are missing of St. Peter are the feet, because when they took him off, they had to cut his legs, split it off, and it's the feet that are missing, fun fact, if you didn't know that. It was just gorgeous. And then we had mass, we had lunch, and then we had another Latin mass. And now this time, day 3, it was so interesting. Not only did I have a great confession before the mass, excellent confession, because I find that most priests, when you confess, can't really actually give good advice. Now maybe some advice helps others in different times, but most of the time, like, you could come in with a struggle and you're the light of the world, be the salt of the earth. And I'm not trying to make fun of that, but this priest gave an excellent confession, really a big moment of growth for me. And we did the mass, and it was interesting because in the homily, the priest was talking about how he's been trying to send letters to Pope Leo the 14th on the Latin Mass, how certain communities that don't even understand Christianity, for some reason, the Latin Mass brings them into the faith. And, like I said to you, a lot of it's like kneeling and just praying and just silence. And it was something where I'm enjoying now that silence. Now, I know I said yesterday I didn't have patience, but for today, little by little, I'm becoming more and more addicted of it. Even, like, I learned the fun fact, there's a moment where the priest is holding his fingers like this, because God forbid that the particles of Christ is on him. This is still blessed. We finished the night out with a dinner, and after dessert, I went over to Taylor Marshall's table with the priest, and I was asking questions, and it was just an awesome conversation, seeing these really, from the whole table, just knowledge of people in theology, and I could ask, and they're firing back answers, and to sit and watch people learn from each other. You know, it was an awesome day to end it with that. Today, I think, is day 4. Probably, actually, this was the best day that I felt good waking up. I've been really tired recently, just with jet lag and trying to catch up on sleep. We're also waking up super, super early every morning. But today I think was my favorite basilica, and I would say it's better than St. Peter's, which was St. Paul's. We go to enter it, and outside the church is a giant statue of St. Paul with the sword, and I'll show you a photo of that. There's above it this in gold, like icons. First, it's based off of the 4 Gospels. Then it's the leader sheep in the center, which represents Jesus, and then 6 sheep on both sides representing the disciples. And then above that is Jesus, St. Paul, and St. Peter. Just so beautiful, the outside of the church. I mean, maybe it's because I feel closest to St. Paul. Maybe that's also why I'm favoritizing it. But then this was also the church when you enter. You've got every single pope that there ever was across the wall, which was incredible. And then you get to the center of the church. And not only is Paul's body buried there, but the cuffs, the links that linked his arms, his handcuffs, when he got his head chopped off. And it was super, super motivating, super cool. If you come from a different Christian doctrine, I really would tell you to go to Italy. And when you start seeing the actual saints that died, it might change your mind to come to Catholicism. It might really open yourself up. But what was interesting about St. Paul's is I went to, if you're facing St. Paul, I went to the left, and there was this saint called St. Stephen. I never had heard of him. He was a saint that Paul made a saint because Paul, who was originally Saul, killed St. Stephen. And they said we put it in honor of the church to show Paul's aggression and how he's changed, which I thought was incredible. Then we moved on to St. Valentine. He has a church. And I'll show you the picture of the skull that you can see. And St. Valentine was very interesting because he was actually mixed marrying pagans and Christians together. And was trying to deal with marriages and trying to deal with couples that were going through issues. And obviously when the Romans got hold of it, they murdered him as well. And it was cool to see his skull and everything. His skull is actually in a Byzantine church that's also under the Catholic. It's one of the rites, the Byzantine rite. It's a Eastern church led by St. Andrew. I could be corrected on that, but it's an Eastern church, but under the Catholic Church. So a lot of the artwork was very old. It was cool. And it was different type of artwork too. And then where did we go? We went to, there's a church dedicated to Mary, another basilica, and it has the wood of the manger that Jesus, when he was born in. And I know many of you might be questioning, well, could it have actually been the manger? Or, in St. Ellen's Basilica, they have Thomas's finger, the finger that he put into Jesus's ribs. And we're probably questioning, well, could this stuff be real? And I question it too, because a lot of this stuff was moved in the 4th century because of St. Ellen. St. Ellen is Constantine's mother, so Constantine the ruler was the one moving it. Here's the thing. When Jesus was born, there were shepherds around him, the 3 kings. There's a possibility that someone saved that stuff. St. Thomas was killed in India, but he still had followers. Somebody could have cut his finger off and brought it back to Jerusalem, and then St. Ellen is finding them. So there is strong possibilities that when there were people around him that they were finding these things. And where else do we go? Oh, I'm also going to send a picture of you guys to show you the altars in Mary in the Basilica. And the priests have to show their backs. Everyone in the Novus Order or new to Catholicism, or you're going to the typical Catholic Mass, not the Latin Mass or the Byzantine Mass. The traditional Mass, the priest is facing you and he's behind the altar. But in a lot of these basilicas, you can't do that. You have to face your back because that's the original way how to do it. Because we're praying through the priest and the priest is praying. We're all praying together up to God. It's not a show. Yes, today we actually went into the catacombs and it was awesome to see, and this is the truth to a lot of my Protestant friends that ask why pray to saints. When you go to these catacombs of 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 2nd century is probably the earliest we found of this. In the 2nd century, we see them praying to saints. Devotions to Mary, to Peter, to Paul. In our catacomb that we walked past, St. Sebastian was up. So, this is a very interesting thing to realize if you're a Protestant. Like, if you go to Italy and you go to these catacombs, you're going to see saints. The original church prayed to saints. It's not an unusual or demonic or, I could just pray to Jesus, which you can, but, this is a real thing. So here he is. I've landed into his neighborhood. The real life Obi-Wan Kenobi, Padre Pio. Sinum bonum, excuse me. So today was very interesting. We took a bus ride to St. Benedict's church. And it was so interesting because she says, the tour guide, well, I hope that nobody's afraid of heights. And we're going up. And and I'm going to be showing you guys these videos, the way the bus is curving, it could almost go off the mountain. And we're going higher and higher and higher. And I'm like, I knew the St. Benedict cross, obviously. I knew St. Benedict, but I don't really know much about him. Who is he? So I'm asking some of the people on the bus, can you tell me about him? And that he's a priest at the end of the medieval era, and he was also an exorcist, and he was also a hermit for 20 years, and he started this new order. And in the order, it's about prayer and work, and all these monks live up there, and they pray 8 times a day and work for 8 times a day, whether that's working at the monastery or, working for people. At the shops, they had beer from the monastery, so I guess these monks make their own beer. But we're going up this mountain, and we finally get to the top, and I think it's 2,000 feet up. It's super high up. You can overlook the whole town from Italy. And it was originally, it's brand new. Originally, it was completely destroyed in World War II. The weird thing is, where St. Benedict's buried with his sister and the altar was somehow not affected, that's interesting. So it was an awesome time. I felt like the only thing that was missing is I need the monks to do kung fu or karate, give me a full monk experience. But it was so much fun. I think because I didn't know him as much, and just the beauty of the monastery. They even have a monument where he actually died, St. Benedict, and it's beautiful. It's with his arms reaching up. It was cool. It was so awesome. The church is gorgeous. I'm going to show you pictures. They got pictures of martyrs getting killed. And then we took our bus ride back. We got some good food, and now we're in San Giovanni. Did I say that right? San Giovanni?
San Giovanni Rotondo.
San Giovanni Rotondo, to see the Padre Pio tomorrow. Yep. I was getting some of the people at dinner excited about Pio, especially there's this 15-year-old boy on my bus that I was like, we're meeting Obi-Wan Kenobi. What do you mean? I was like, yeah, we're meeting a real Jedi Knight. So yes, I'm in the bathroom. This is day 6 or 5, or I don't know. This was probably the most emotional day I had. We got to see Padre Pio. And I'm going to be showing you videos. We went to the bedroom where he died, the chair that he died in. We got to see his body. We got to see the hospital he built. and just learned so many new fascinating stories. Even like, I didn't know this, up on the chapel where St. Michael's above on the ceiling with the cross, that's where he actually got his stigmata. I thought for some reason it was by a tree. I don't know where I got that from, but I learned that some of the monks thought he was crazy with the stuff that was going on with him. We learned about the miracles that he performed, and the tour guide, his grandfather was saved by Padre Pio. Padre Pio warned him, he was a construction worker, not to go this certain path. And thank God he did, because the walls collapsed the path that he was thinking about going. So it's interesting that like the tour guides, their grandparents knew Padre Pio. But it was a super emotional day for me because I wrote a letter to him, a prayer list, a petition, and just how thankful I am, because I'm Catholic because of Padre Pio. Because as you've seen in the videos earlier, because of the miracles I've experienced through him, that's why I'm Catholic. So it was an awesome day. Trying to think if there's anything else to say about the Padre Pio. It was just so awesome just to be in his presence, see his outfit that he wore the last time he had Mass, to see the confessional booths. It was just awesome to be in the chapel, and the new chapel that he was in as well. It was awesome. And then we got some food, pasta and pizza, and then we headed to a cave in which St. Michael appeared in. And it was like such an interesting church. I almost would say it was like I was going into a Hindu temple. You're in this crazy town on a mountain, and then you go into this cave, and there's like a monument of St. Michael. There's a footprint on the floor that he supposedly stood there, and it was probably one of the coolest churches I ever was in. Hey, so this is day 5 or 6. So, sorry, this is my last day, but I'm trying to film and go back to the back history. So we went to the Church of Lanciano. I might be saying that wrong. That's the first Eucharistic miracle that has ever occurred. I've always struggled with the Eucharist. It's the Lord, help me, help my unbelief. I've always struggled with it. And this is the first miracle which a monk did not believe in the Eucharist, and a miracle occurred where the Eucharist started bleeding. In the 70s and in the 80s, they did historical, scientific research on it. Now, I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, that's fine. No. I'm showing you right now the photos of the tests that they studied this Eucharist in the 70s and 80s. They found that it's heart tissue in a certain section of the heart. The blood type is AB, a very rare blood type. They know for a fact, whatever it is, it's real heart tissue. And what's crazy is, I could be wrong. I think this occurred in the late 1200s. I'll fact check myself. I'll put it in. And then it was studied so many years later, and it proved that. Then what disturbed me, not only can you still see the monstrum, I think that's what it's called, of the Eucharist and the blood. You could see it physically, you could still see it. I was walking down, there's the original church where it occurred. So where it is the new church that they built, and then lower below it is the church where the miracle occurred. And I was seeing all the videos of Carlos Acutis. He's the new modern day saint with the blue jeans. The research. Do you know that the most recent miracle that occurred, a Eucharistic miracle, was 2008? And fun fact, do you know what blood type it was? AB blood type. There's been so many Eucharistic miracles. The following day was Assisi. We started off with the church where St. Francis heard the words of, rebuild my church. the most shocking thing of the whole day was that the chapel that he heard the voice of God maybe can fit 15 people. And I'm going to be showing you the footage of it right now as we speak. It was amazing that God could speak, and it's been through this tour, God speaks to people in these little unknown small towns. You know, I always pictured with St. Francis like this big church that's kind of collapsing. No. This was a little tiny church in the middle of nowhere. And Assisi, oh my God. It's like when Taylor Marshall said it to me, he went up to me and he goes, "Isn't this like we're in a Disney theme park?" Like, yeah, you're like on a movie set. You enter the Crusades, the night era. All of the buildings are beautiful, gorgeous. It's like what you think Italy is. Not only when you're up on the churches, up on the hills, the farmland and everything, but just the beauty of the buildings. And I'm going to be showing you photos of like little narrow staircases and the way the town looks and just how clean, and like they kept it in that time period. It's gorgeous. Then we went to the Basilica of St. Clare. Now, in the Basilica of St. Clare, you have the actual cross where St. Francis heard Christ talk to him. I'm going to be showing you photos of that right now. So cool. It's one of the highlights of the trip that I wanted to see. That and Padre Pio and St. Paul. Those were my three highlights and what I wanted to see. And then we go to St. Clare, and I don't really knew much about St. Clare. The original church that St. Francis heard God's voice, St. Clare died in. I'll put a photo of that as well. We got to see the location where she died. And then in St. Clare's Basilica, where the cross is, we got to see her body. And like hearing a story when the Turks came to invade Assisi, and they come in and she holds the Eucharist up, and for some reason they hear this big thundering voice and they run out, which is a historical fact. This actually did happen, you know. And I got a little, I call action figures, a little figure of St. Clare, her holding up the Eucharist, the power of the body of Christ. And then we went to the St. Francis Basilica. Now, unfortunately, you can't see his body because his body, they're moving his bones because there's a big celebration coming up. It's like an anniversary. But even that, you see the famous photo of St. Francis with the birds. Before that, if I backtrack, when you enter, you see a knight on a horse sad because St. Francis was a knight. But it's after that that he hears God's calling for him. I have photos of that. And it was so cool to walk in the footsteps of St. Francis and learn about St. Clare, and then see Carlos Acutis. First, we went into another church where St. Francis and St. Clare were baptized. Now, obviously, if you know the story, they converted later, but there was this Catholic culture, so they were still baptized as children. So we went to the baptismal font, and then there's this like relic of Carlos, and his body is actually deteriorating, but his organs are not. So they're like, the nun that we walked by is like, well, this is his heart. I'm like, all right. And I walk past it. I mean, I do bless it. I've got a couple friends that are huge fans of this friend. I bless it. And then I keep walking through the church because with this tour, we're moving so fast. And is one of the tour guests stops by and they look at it and they're like, you got to see it. Guys, I go and I look at it and I'm like this close to it. Sorry, I'm this close to it. I'm looking at a heart. I think he died 2006. Correct me if I'm wrong. The heart is still there with veins on it. I've never seen anything like that in my entire life. I've never seen anything like that in my entire life. We did go to his body. His body is decaying, so they painted it and everything. Still amazing and just inspiring that, you know, anybody could become a saint. You don't need to be a priest to be a saint. You don't need to be the holy of the holies, you know. So it was amazing. I think Assisi was my favorite part of Italy that we saw on this tour. The highlight probably would be Padre Pio. I spent at least 30 minutes or more with his body and praying him and thanking him, and I wrote a letter to him that I dropped off to his body. But I would say the highlight of this tour overall, one is I got to spend my time with my mother in Italy, memories that, 30 years from now we'll think about and we'll never forget. Another was meeting such amazing people on this pilgrimage. They were amazing, of all ages, of all different countries. And it was really sad, today's the last day, and we split. Half the trip is going to Venice, the rest is going to Rome. I'm leaving, I gotta go back to work for my business. And just meeting everyone and such good people, good hearts, learning so much from them, having so much in common from them. It was awesome. I would say the highlight is spending time with my mom and the people. I don't know if I'll ever go back to Italy or not. What I've witnessed has grown me in the faith. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I totally forgot about this. I'm sorry. We have been rejected. And I'm a Novus Order Catholic. I still will go to Novus Order Masses. Okay, I'm not against Novus Order. For the Latin Mass, we've been rejected. Multiple churches on this pilgrimage. Matter of fact, we were at St. Benedict's Church, Monte Cristo, I'll put the name down right here. It took 40 minutes before Mass because multiple monks, including the bishops, argued with our priests and said, "You're not allowed to do it. You could do any language, just not Latin." And the priest said, "What did St. Benedict, his liturgy, what did he do?" They all shut up because they knew he did the Latin Mass. I'm not against or pro, but I'm for all Masses, whether it's Latin or it's Novus Order. And then the day when we saw the Eucharist, they denied our priest in 3 different churches. 3 different churches. No, we would do that. No. It could be the bishop. Maybe the bishop, he's afraid of losing his position, so he might be saying no because of the higher-ups. I don't know all the paperwork with Pope Francis. I don't fully understand it, but it's up to the bishop's discretion of approving or not approving the Latin Mass. And I thought it was disgusting being around in Italy, and we weren't allowed to do Latin Mass. Again, I'm a Novus Order Catholic. I enjoyed the Latin Mass. I still enjoy the Novus Order. I'm totally not one or the other. I love both. But to not allow someone to share Mass is Mass. The body of Christ is the body of Christ. Maybe I finally understand what Bishop Barron meant when he said we need Christian unity. Stop at the politics, stop at the disagreements. Yeah, maybe right or wrong. Truth is truth, but I experienced that here. And I watched this priest get denied, and then we were going to sometimes random churches out in the sticks to celebrate Mass because we just were getting kicked out of the rest of them. Like Father said, pray for everyone. Pray for the ones that neglect you. Pray for them. Anyway, it was a wonderful trip. Spent time with Mom. Met wonderful people. Grew spiritually.